I think we can slowly start. Gonna see if I can get my camera up and running. And then we see if we get more joining. But like always, this is being recorded, and I think they will send this out to you on your mail later. The recording is always there to watch if you have to leave earlier or so. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how I usually look at cinematography or environment art. So I'm coming from the perspective of kind of portfolio work and stuff like that, and usually how I think about it when I do my scenes. So for anyone that's new, like we usually do these streams once a month, but for anyone new, I can quickly just maybe present myself. Let's see. I think we're going to do it easy and just jump to an old presentation here. A second. But I'm going to do it quickly because we want to go to the fun part. Let's see if I can find that. Also, a while ago since I presented myself, so let's see if I can find that presentation still. Worst case, we do it like this. We jump just to my art station and talk about it like freely, I feel like. So I'm gonna start screen sharing that. So quickly, my name is Jacob Claussen. I work here at the Vertex School. I kind of cover most part of the game art part and do classes also. And I've been doing mentoring here for quite some while now. I started 5 years ago mentoring at the Vertex School. But I worked in the industry and I've done a little bit of everything. I started in indie, worked on Blast Out, which was kind of a student project that became a studio. And after that, I did Walking Dead with Starbreeze. And when that finished, I joined Ubisoft as a vegetation artist and worked on that until I felt like I wanted to go back to the smaller type of studio. So I joined Fall Damage and worked on a competitive shooter called Alara. And I did that up until this summer. But I always kind of like been working on my portfolio pieces during these kind of times. Like I feel like I learn the most when I don't have to get stuff out. So for me, still to this date, I always kind of work on personal projects because I think that's where I have the chance to develop new skills and stuff like that, but also really push kind of my, I don't know, like for movies and stuff like that. So something for that you to know about me is that I didn't join 3D because of games. I went to university in here in Sweden, and that was to a game school basically because we didn't have movie schools. So I went to game school, thought that I could just study that and then move over to movie production after that. But I kind of liked the working environment of the games, like working very different type of personalities, but also disciplines. Like I don't think you see where you meet kind of programmer, meet artist, audio, everything basically in a compote, and everyone needs to kind of go in the same direction to create a good game. So I really like that, and I stayed in that, but I kind of kept my love for movie making and cinematography to my portfolio pieces. So that's always something I've been striving for with my kind of latest projects, basically. So most of my projects always entail quite a lot of kind of like a video sequence and stuff like that. So I usually build my scenes with that in mind. And that can add a lot of time to projects. That's usually why my projects usually takes a little bit longer, because for every shot I add a lot of work. So I try to be smart about that. And that's something I want to show in today's demo, is that I usually plan out my shots quite early. So I kind of stagnate all my shots very early in production of a portfolio piece. And then I can kind of like know exactly how much work I have in front of me. We're going to look at that a little bit today. But first, I want to go through a bit of a presentation. Some of you might have seen this because it's part of one of the terms here at Vertex School, but I think it's a good presentation to talk about. It talks about gray boxing, but also about composition and stuff like that. And I think this plays a big role into creating beautiful camera shots and stuff like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about gray boxing, because I usually work a lot with gray boxing. So I want to just explain it for anyone that's kind of new when it comes to this and why we do it. So why we do it in video games is basically when we create video games, it's very complex. Like everything needs to work together to create a fun game. And if we would just create a lot of art in the beginning, it would be very expensive to kind of like go back and change that. So in every game, we work very simple in the beginning, and we figure out things with like very simple shapes. And I think that's a very good technique to bring into your portfolio work also. So here you can kind of see a couple of games here where they have blockouts and how close they are to the finished piece, basically. And it's quite tricky to kind of like commit like this. But if you have a solid kind of like foundation, usually it's kind of colors are there, composition is there. The only thing that gets addition is basically the textures, and the textures is just extra detail. If it looks good in the kind of blockout, usually it will look good when you're adding texture and the final touches. So like, why do we use it? Like similar, like I said, basically it deepens the work. We can try out much more and see what works and not work in the beginning of a production. It's a very flexible. It's also like a very good tool to get everyone aligned on the same vision. So we, with this kind of way of working, we always kind of know that everyone kind of can play the game early on. We don't have to wait for things to be finished to kind of test the game and see that that everyone is aligned. We can also kind of like discover things that are not working that well. And I think both in terms of like gameplay. So for example, if you think of like a competitive shooter, usually have two sides where each team starts to really get those kind of like timing rights and stuff like that. It's very nice. Just being able to move around boxes and try that out in the beginning. And now we can figure out modularity early on. And modularity metrics, we talked about that a little bit last month. But for anyone that was not part of that, basically when we built games, we built them kind of like with Lego blocks with very like specific measurements. And the reason is that one, if we always have the same measurements of everything, we can swap them out very easily. So if we have a wall with a window and it's 4 by 4 meters, and we want to change that to another window side, or maybe we want to add a door there. If we have that being a 4 by 4, we can just switch it out and it's going to fit. And it makes it very kind of flexible, because then each artist can work on a small part of a big building, but also rendering wise, there is a reason for that. So it renders much better and gives better performance when we use modularity. And this is one picture I really love. I remember when this came. In the past, it was not that open to show like blockouts and gray box. And I think it's kind of nice that it's starting to become a little bit more common to show that. But here we see basically from Uncharted how it starts from a designer figuring out the player space and using very funny shapes, but we can kind of see the trees and stuff like that. And then artist or concept artist or maybe designer sometimes, level designers come in and help out to shape the landscape a little bit, giving kind of like each object a little bit more clear silhouette. I would say art blockout, what you see here, is usually what I drive in my portfolio pieces as an early blockout. And that's what we're going to see in the demo today. But yeah, then we have like just the artist going over. Usually concept artist comes in here and do paint overs. And this is what I love with the video game industry, is like you have like every discipline here from level design to concept art to environment art, maybe also tech artist, working together, figuring out things together. And then finally we get to the final picture. So everyone has kind of like something they can kind of lean towards the early blockout, and they can look and really figure it out together. So I just want to talk a little bit about gray box in portfolio and why I use it a lot, and I think it's super nice to use. So one thing is that we can like figure out the composition, and we can massage composition. I think composition can be quite hard to get right, and I think it's much harder to get right if we have a bunch of textures, effect, and things there. It's easier to like move around things and figure out things if everything is just pure simpleness, basically. And I usually mix in color into this early stage also, because for me, like color drives lighting so much. And when I say color, I mean like base color on your surfaces, basically. And we're going to see that in the demo also. Then we can also establish like sizes and stuff like that. So we can really get the sense of space becoming kind of correctly measurement, especially if we base it on a real life. It's a kind of a guessing game in the beginning. You're gonna like put the character and then like slowly work until all the kind of metrics feel correct. And this is probably my favorite part, and I think we're gonna see that a little bit today. We can plan lighting quite early. If we have like a solid blockout, we don't have to change that much more. I would say usually light and shape kind of like forms the most things. And then of course we have the surface on top of that. That would be the textures. But for me, that's just kind of like extra detail. And sometimes I feel like extra details is kind of a more of a pull back and pull forward. So it's much easier to kind of like add that last and kind of push it maybe towards the focal point where we want to keep like the viewer to look, to make that space much more kind of like detailed and interesting. Then we're gonna get like a natural focal point. And I'm blocking out stories. So I usually call this like proxy models. They can be called a couple of other things, I think, but this is something I use a lot, where I always like to kind of like block out the story early on, and we're going to do that a little bit today when we do our shots. And that's kind of like how simple it is to kind of just box modeling and just coming up with stories and having fun with it. Because I think it's always a commitment to do 3D, especially if we want to do like AAA or like semi-realism, but also stylized. Like when we have committed to something, it takes time. So if we look at the guns here, like someone is cleaning a gun, that gun is probably like a week's work. So we really need to know that, okay, that is kind of our driver of the story. So I really like to figure out that before committing to the assets early on. And here we can just see that with the old scene I did, the Kyoto Cafe, where I found an idea traveling around on Google Maps and Pinterest and stuff like that, and then just kind of blocking out that idea. And I do that a lot. Like I go around on Google Maps, I do a block out, and then I might like put it to the side. So I think like gray boxing is a kind of good thing to just train also and become comfortable. Kind of like how can we work as simple as possible before kind of jumping on the fun part, and that's kind of detailing. But because then after that is just adding detail until it feels finished. Oops, yeah, like that. Key takeaways seems to be gone. I think I had a slide here. Might have swapped out. But I think this one is the more interesting one. It's composition. I want to talk a little bit about composition. And I would say composition is a very kind of broad, big topic. So I like with this presentation, I'm trying to kind of like somewhat awaken interest in it. And I would say after that, it's more about like keeping exploring it. I would say I still learn stuff every day about it, like while working and while researching. So it's nothing that's gonna kind of just be finished after a scene or two. Like I think it's a very complex subject, and I think it's a very fun subject to reiterate the learning on. So yeah, like a composition for me basically is that it's a tool for us to kind of drive the viewer. We can get like with a picture, and usually on ArtStation and portfolio work, we create pictures, and with a picture, we want the viewer to look at a certain thing. Like we want to tell a story with a picture. So usually we want the person to probably also travel inside of the picture and then looking at a very specific thing, and that specific thing we usually call a focal point. And here I would say we have like typical composition types. So there's a book by Edgar Payne, and it's kind of like just simplifying tools we can kind of like remembering when we're setting up compositions. So you can Google his name and you're going to find bunch of these. Like the book is like a super thick book, but these are quite common on Google, and they just tell kind of different ways of thinking. I think the most common one is like the S curve. We can see it here, and you probably kind of like thought of that or seen it when you create kind of like a road that shape is very like S curve shaped, and it leads to kind of the focal point, and it's a very kind of like easy way to kind of move the viewer towards the object you want them to look at. And an S curve doesn't always need to be a road. Like usually it's a lake also, but you can be creative with it. Like you can kind of stitch it together with other tools also. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of tools we can use when we are thinking of composition. I would say shapes is a very strong one. So if we look at these two, we have like quite clear focal points. We have the tower and the huts here. And what these two artists have done is make very kind of distinct shapes out of them. And that way, we're just going to kind of look at them right away. So I would say when you have like a composition and you know what you want the viewer to look at, just kind of like think of that shape and how you can manipulate it until it feels kind of like very distinct and noticeable. And you can play with sizes also. So Pablo here makes like a giant tower. It's very natural that you will look at that then. Scale is also fun. I would say scale we see a lot in video games, but also movies. And here we can really kind of like just create an awe when we're looking at things. but also explaining that awe can I mean coolness or epicness. But to really understand that, we need to also understand that a viewer will maybe not understand the scale if we don't give them the tools. And I would say the classic one in concept art is always kind of putting birds next to something. You're gonna see that if you start watching concept art now, there is always birds next to the giant epic tower, just because we as human we kind of recognize sizes of birds. But humans, of course, is also a great tool, but we can't always have humans. I like Kevin's example here, where this artist is instead using sheep and then a plane to make it very clear, kind of like how epic this field is. And then value, we can use value as a tool also. So here we can create depth into the picture. We can start usually the typical way of doing kind of value in a composition is kind of starting with the darks and then midtones, and then it gets lighter the further away you go. And that kind of comes down to like atmosphere works like that. But then, of course, we can kind of like shift this around. And I mean, if you look around at thumbnailing and stuff like that, there is ways of kind of bending these rules. But I would say in the beginning, it can be quite nice to think about just this way of doing it. And another thing we can do is also we can push the values on the focal point. So if we look at the tower here or the castle, it has like different types of values, and that kind of makes it add a lot of noise in terms of the values, which makes kind of the naturally we would just look at that basically. So I want to kind of use this scene, which and I still remember this scene. I think it came out like 5 years ago now, but I still think it looks beautiful by Daniil here. So we have leading lines. You can say that it's basically an S curve here also, like the path there. But then we can kind of like do that around the image. So kind of using objects in the scenery to kind of like create natural curves that kind of just bend towards the focal point. Like really pushing the viewer towards the object you want them to look at. And then framing. So sometimes we call a frame in a frame. And basically, like an image, of course, has a frame, like the frame we set. But then a very common tool to use is like setting the object in a frame, basically. So we are framing the focal point, basically. The point of interest, and maybe even pushing the frame in an angle so it's kind of pointing at it. And it's very common way to create kind of like a sense of depth, but also really making sure that the viewer will look at the object. And then we have value here again, because I think this is a very kind of good example of what I talked about when it comes to like pushing the noisiness of values where your point of interest is. So we have the lighthouse here, and you can see kind of like how kind of dense the different values are here. So this is going to kind of become a natural a point of interest. And this technique is quite nice. So if you have Photoshop, you can do something called posterization on your images in grayscale. And you can lower kind of the value. So I grayscale this, and then I just put this to a value of 4, I think. And then it basically makes this image 4 values. And it's a very good tool to see if you have a good value structure. And I can show how to set that up in Photoshop after the presentation. I'm just gonna, I forgot to put up the chat. So I forgot to say that if anyone has questions or if anything goes fast, feel free to write in the question in the chat, and I'm having the chat on the side here to see that. So I want to just talk about some typical things that can happen when we build images. This one is like I sat a lot with concept artists, and I think this is like the worst nightmare for a concept artist. They always talk about this, and it can be good to think about, and it's tangents. So tangents is basically when we build images. Images gonna have line and lines basically because objects kind of like cross each other, and if they cross too perfectly on top of each other, it can be very hard for the viewer to kind of determine what is what. So I really like this example where you have the hat kind of merging into like the barn's roof. So it's a bit hard to understand one, like which one is like front and back, but also which like how far is the hat going and stuff like that. So that can always be good, like trying to avoid having things kind of perfectly align in your images. And then another tool we can use is to not split our horizon. So I try to always avoid having my horizon line being dead center in the image. And the reason is that we get a much more dynamic feel if we push down the camera a little bit or push it up a little bit. So if we have the camera lower, usually we will get a little bit more that protagonist or the point of interest, which is a character, but that can be a building or anything also, will feel a little bit more in power. And usually we say that if you are above it, you are in the power position basically as a viewer. And this is being used a lot in movies, of course, when you are, for example, doing horror movies. You can play around with that a little bit. Yes, we are basically just going into a little bit composition rules and stuff like that, and then we will move over to the demo after the presentation. So we're gonna, in like a couple of minutes, move over to the demo. Eye of camera. So I think like before even jumping into like creating camera shots and stuff like that, I think we need to understand a camera to a certain point. So I think it's very easy to just want to kind of like create images and stuff like that. But I think having a fundamental understanding of like what the camera is and what to do with it can be good. I would say we don't have to go too deep into it, but having some sort of certain understanding can be good. So the first thing is to kind of decide our aspect ratio. How big is our image, basically? Like how is the foundation of our image? And I can kind of like steer the feeling of the image, basically. So if we have a typical widescreen, which you usually see in movies, but also video game, I would say that's kind of the standard, and you get a very like balanced image and stuff like that. It's kind of like the one I usually start with when I do scenes. But then it can be fun to kind of try a more cinematic. You usually see that when you look at kind of like more epic type of movies, when there is a wider shot and you're gonna make everything feel more grand and more big, and the viewer is gonna feel more inside of the picture because you see much wider from side to side. And then if you want to create a little bit more of a creepy feeling, you can just push together the image a little bit more and create a little bit uneasiness basically. And we're going to look how to set this up in Unreal. Then I would say that focal length is something that's usually quite overlooked. Usually what I see is that we just throw out the camera, set it up, and then take our screenshot. I think the standard of Unreal is like 11 millimeters. It's a very kind of wide shot, and what that creates is we can see here basically like with a wide shot you get like all the lines in the image becomes very stretched, which can be a kind of cool effect and a good effect if we want something to feel kind of like a fast, or if we want to make something feel bigger. But it can also sometimes feel like you've seen it before, because kind of like if you have the standard camera there, I think it can be nice to break that sometimes. I tend to kind of set it on standard, which is a little bit like more what you will see in movies and stuff like that. Typical kind of like camera lens, 35 to 70 millimeter, where you get more of a natural look on your image. And then, of course, if we want to focus in on stuff, so when I build scenes, I usually think of my objects as something I want to kind of show. I want to showcase, of course, props and stuff like that. Then telephoto lens can be great, like something that's much more zoomed in, much more capturing kind of like the object in mind. So I would say like playing around with the different settings like this for each kind of like shot will make already your kind of scene feel more dynamic. So it's not like just the same focal length for every shot. So I always recommend to try to kind of bend this and think of kind of when and why to use it. Now we have aperture also, and I try to simplify aperture here quite a lot, where we can just think of it as basically another focus tool when we want to focus in on something. So if we want something to really just get into the focus of the lens, we just lower the aperture, which means that the thing we have in focus is going to be non-blurry and everything around it's going to be blurry. And that way we can really make sure that the viewer is focusing on that object, but not the background. So that's great if we have like a prop and we don't want like the things behind it kind of like taking interest from the image. And then if we want to show a little bit kind of like everything, we just higher the aperture. And before we move over to the demo, I just want to give some reading material here. I always kind of look for new ones, but these are some of my favorite ones. I would say it's one thing to learn from kind of like video game productions, stuff like that. I would always recommend to kind of look beyond that, especially when it comes to camera work. I would always kind of like lean towards movies because they have kind of mastered it. They have worked with it for longer than video games. So I think there is a good amount of knowledge to take there. And I would say like the filmmaker eyes explains camera work and how to think about these different rules quite nicely. And then I have a YouTube playlist that I can link from Neil Bevins. He's a concept artist and he explains composition rule sets in a very kind of clear and simple way. And these I would just rewatch over and over again because they are a great reminder. And then framed ink, I would say, is another good when it comes to composition, understanding how to use composition to drive interest in your images, basically. And that was that. So now we're gonna jump over to our scene. So I'm gonna use this blockout for our movie making. So we are gonna open it in Unreal here. Of course. So I'm not going to link it now. I'm going to look it up later, and it's going to be part of that mail you all get. So we have a scene here, and what I want to show with this one is kind of like how I usually start projects. And after this is basically adding textures, adding more detail, adding VFX and stuff like that. But this is usually how I start. And this blockout, I can probably share how this was created because this was part of yesterday's class. So the building of this was recorded. So I'm going to see if I can kind of like shop that out for you guys. And I can add that in the mail that I'm sending over. And then you can see if you're interested, kind of like the building of this. But it's quite similar to what we did last month when I did more of the modularity block out, but here is more of just blocking out a composition basically. And I can talk about the idea first a little bit. So I went to Pinterest. I found this very wholesome restaurant. And I'm guessing this is kind of America, Maine, probably. And I kind of like in Sweden now. It's kind of like rainy and dark, so I kind of put it in a more vibrant location. So I usually like to do that. I take something from real life and I just add another twist on it, basically, or kind of like bend it something. So I kind of put it a little bit more in vibrant, warm place, basically. So I've kind of like when worked, set up like my main camera, and I always kind of work towards that, and that's kind of like driving the beginning of the composition. We have like somewhat of an S curve here. I think we probably want to bend it a little bit more towards us in the end here. And we have the framing device, so we can look at that. And usually now, like I would say, after a while you stop thinking about that exactly, but it kind of just happens. So these two kind of like are framing this. So we have the seagulls on the poles here, and the objects here are kind of framing. And then of course we have like things kind of pointing towards our point of interest, which is the restaurant. So I get the question, is there a story? I mean, I would say that's something I want to kind of like do now, basically start adding a story. So that's kind of what I usually do when I'm building. I kind of like adding it while I'm going through the blockout. So I have like a slight story here, right? I have a restaurant in a kind of like warm location here, but I don't want to add to the story. So I have some other camera shots that we did yesterday. This one I can delete. And that's usually what I set up. I set up like usually a wide further away shot. And here I'm kind of playing with like a an overarching shot to kind of I was thinking like it would be cool if this would be a project later, like seeing kind of fish kind of like going around here. So it could be a quite dynamic, cool shot actually. And then the close up. And I usually mix up my shot composition, and usually before even thinking of setting up video sequences, I tend to just work with like these still images. And I do that for quite some while because adding like the sequence or the video making, that just adds kind of like more question marks. So I like try to like be simple the longest I can. What I usually do is I have like for example these shots, and then I would add these into my Miro or my PureF, and I would kind of like start putting them like this and question myself like do I need anything more? Like it would be nice maybe to add a couple of more shots, like maybe an interior shot. But what that means is more work. So I add that into the equation. So it's quite nice to do this when you have a simple block out like this and not do it in the end of the production. Because then like you want to be careful having kind of like things being not equally detailed basically. So for every shot we add much more work. But I wanted to add one more shot, so I was starting to think about one more close-up shot. So first thing I'm gonna do is naming this. So I'm gonna do camera top and camera boxes probably. So I do F2 there to name this basically. We can do close up and unbox. Then I know what it is. Because I want one more close up. And I was thinking, so before I do that, I remember I wanted to just show, because you can see I'm working with a wider shot. So I just want to create like a complete new camera instead of copying that. So we're going to just do that. Because I just want to show what I've set as settings here. So now I'm in, like the first thing is to click here and then create camera. And we don't want to do camera actor. Camera actor is for when you have a player. It's a simplified camera basically with less options. So when you do portfolio work, always work with cinematic camera actor. And then it's going to create one. And if we jump out of it, we can see it's basically a gizmo of a camera like this. And to jump into it, we can go here on perspective, and it's going to be called cinematic camera, and then it's going to get kind of the number it is in the stack of cameras. So now I'm in kind of inside of the camera, and we can see this is more of a typical wide shot in terms of kind of the frame here. So if I jump to these, you can see that the black lines become bigger, basically, a little bit like you see in a movie. So that's the first thing I set here. And this comes down to, I would say, a little bit taste, what we like to have. There is no, I would say, right or wrong here. If we want to have like more of a typical video game shot, this would be quite fitting, right? But I like to squeeze down the top and bottom bar. And we can do that by going to film back here and lowering these. And I usually set this on just 35 and then 15. I think 36 is actually the right number there. Let's see. 35. And there is a calculation of this, but I used to remember these nowadays. I can't remember really exactly how the calculation goes, but Alex Tucker, who made a great blog about this, explains kind of the calculation of that, like here. So whoever wants to kind of read how to calculate other type of these, it's 36 actually. I'm gonna switch to that. Always good to go back to these resources. But I'm linking that, and Alec Tucker is he's basically working as a cinematographer, environment artist in the industry. So his work is even more leaning to do basically this as work, and he does that for Epic Games, if I remember correctly. The next thing we can set, like I said, when we push in this camera in, we always get, I think this resets because I had other, but when you do it, it's probably 11 might be if I do it like this. It might have changed, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be 1188. So check that, but they might have changed it in 5.6. I'm not sure, or if it's because my was set to 35 and that's why it's picking that. But this is the one we want to change. So first we can go back here and just set our screen size. And then we can see kind of like how much this is kind of like stretching the image. And when I can see the effects happening here. And I would say I usually kind of like when I start, I set 35 to find compositions, sometimes 50. And if I'm inside, it might be very tight with 50. Like then I do 24. We could like fit a camera shot like this in here. And And that's basically it. Like I tend to not complicate it much more like that. We can, of course, set the aperture also if we want. So if we go to our main shot, and let's say we had gonna pull in an object here in the foreground. We can color it quickly. Here I have the blockout colors. We used this last time also, like simplified colors to just have something there. I'm gonna just take this box. We can just see the effect of the aperture. So if I take the camera now and lower the aperture, we can see that we are blurring this this box basically. And we can focus in on something also. Right now it's like super far away, so we can focus in on just the building. And we can see like we are blurring basically. Of course, we don't have like a further distance thing, so like there's not going to be any blur in the background for this shot. This shot is not playing that much with like great distance object. It's a more kind of confined image. Hello, welcome. Yes, so everything is going to be recorded from the beginning, so everything is going to be there. You haven't missed too much. You basically missed a small presentation and a little bit of this. And then I also said that the building of this, I did that yesterday in a class, and I'm going to try to kind of like extract that recording if I can. And send that also if anyone is curious how this was built. We're going to do a little bit building because I want to talk a little bit about setting up composition while building, basically. But yeah, that's basically all the camera work I usually do. So I'm keeping it usually quite simple. So now we can jump back to our next close-up shot here. And I kind of started a sunbathing chair here. And when I'm kind of looking for a shot, I'm trying to go back to what we did in the presentation and thinking like, is there a way to kind of create a foreground with a shot so it's not just the object and that's it? And that's where it can be quite nice to kind of like block out together. So I can see that there is missing kind of like a stick here, like one of these. So we can add that. And I think that could maybe help the image a little bit. So I'm going to just kind of like add that in here. And I'm using the game exporter here. So I have stacked this whole object and I'm blocking it out here in Maya. So I have it stacked here, very kind of unclean. And that's totally fine because I'm just merging it into one object with the game exporter. And when I click here, it's going to just become one FBX. I'm like, for me, it's a bit annoying always sitting and clicking this. So I made a quick button for that. And I'm happy to share that with you guys if you want it, like a meld script that basically just clicks the button so I don't have the window open all the time. And you could shortcut that. I'm planning to do that, but I always forget to do that. So now we got that stick there basically. So now we can maybe use that a little bit as a foreground element. So I'm thinking, so I don't want this to cover the whole space. I want a little bit negative space there. And I'm going to kind of position it. And I want, of course, the plate here in focus. So I'm going to go and click this. Yep, I'm gonna set that up. And last time we also added this mel script, which is like the up and down in grid. I'm going to add that in the video for anyone that's joining today. And this is kind of like how I usually work. So I'm always kind of on grid. So what's happening here is basically I'm just half in the grid, and I'm doing that with shortcuts. So this basically, and I'm gonna include that one also in today's kind of files for anyone that joined not last time. But yeah, we pick the camera, we pick the focus button, and we use focus on the plate. And now we kind of have a quite focused image. I will probably kind of move this up a little bit. So when I'm looking at this shot, I'm kind of like looking at things also. So I try to think of like the end result of this and what I'm presenting from, of course, from a standpoint of what looks like cinematically nice, but also as an environment artist. Like in the end, for me, portfolio work is about kind of presenting stuff. So I'm kind of like putting that into almost like the calculation also. So I kind of want to include here because I'm kind of imagining it would be very nice if I would ZBrush this, for example, to have this being quite detailed and interesting, like maybe a nail here and stuff like that. So I'm kind of like want to include a little bit of this bottom. Same with this top here. Even if that's going to be blurry, it can be nice to just have the top of this hole visible in the shot. And this would be kind of like an establishing shot. And then I'm imagining already that I would probably do another shot that comes after this, that's zooming in on the plate. So we can set that up already. So we do plate. Establish, we can add plate first. We have those coming after each other in the context of the outliner. So we have establishing shot, and then we do another one, jump into that. We do plate, close up. So I'm setting that up. So I'm inside of the close up now, and I'm gonna just move to this empty plate. And here I kind of like thinking that this share is kind of nice to have here. Great question. So this might look kind of like stylized, and this is kind of like how all my scenes starts basically, but then they end up to realism basically. So I haven't decided. So that's kind of a great question because usually these blockouts open up the chance for me to stylize this or to kind of go realism. So that's the nice thing with like having a blockout that kind of just somewhat feels like it is like cohesive in style. Like everything here is kind of like a blockout style, but then later I can decide to go stylized and kind of like ZBrush everything and make it a little bit more kind of like wonky in silhouette, or I could go like Ubisoft style and make everything very believable and realistic. And the reason why I do this is because I can kind of like very quickly change things on the fly. So it's a very kind of fast iterative tool to use basically. Especially like in production also. So when we worked on our competitive shooter, when we start adding art, we need to always kind of address problems basically because we have a competitive shooter. So a lot of complaining for fairness happens. And of course, you don't want to spend like a lot of time on like beautiful art and then you have to take it away because it's unfair for the game. That's why it's much easier to kind of just work like this and just try it out. And then it's also like a tool for people that maybe don't can understand an idea. So in production, kind of like showing an idea and most people will understand this idea, and then they can kind of say, yeah, I kind of like this vibe, for example, maybe, and then you can just explain that there's going to be a layer of realism on top of this after. So that's kind of like the mindset of this. But yeah, we have focused on the plate, but the plate is empty. So this I do always kind of like I kind of put up cameras, but now I kind of have to like add to this composition. So I'm gonna add point of interest on this plate. Just a plate is a little bit boring, I feel like. So I'm gonna I use kind of cubes here to figure out things. So I'm thinking like pizza slide is a bit funny. The guy that has the lobster store chilling and eating pizza instead. So I'm just gonna add this. And what I want to show with this is that we can kind of like come up with some ideas quite quickly here to add into our storytelling. And you can see I haven't even like started setting up the like camera work and stuff like that yet. Because for me, it's like we need to have like good fundamental compositions first before even like thinking of the camera work. So it's always about like building simple, and it's I would say it's quite hard to commit to that. Like it's very easy to wanting to jump to the end part of something. I'm gonna do the pizza slides, and then we can do could maybe do like pizza slides and then sell the idea that it's like lobster slides, but I don't know how we would sell that. Like let's see, where do we have? These have kind of jumped around for me. So we're gonna add red. I'm looking for. So this one is too detailed for me. So I try to force myself to work with as simple as possible objects. So I'm kind of like lowering the resolution of this square or circle, just to force that idea of simplification. I'm gonna add some pizza slides, and here we are adding some pepperoni, maybe. And the cool thing is that we can kind of try this in the camera now and see, do we like this or do we need to rethink this? So I'm just going to click this button, open up Unreal here and re-import the whole scene. And now we have the pizza slides. These are flipped, so we're going to fix that. I'm going to explain this. Basically, I think I accidentally negative scaled these pizza slides or the salami slides. It's not visible in Maya, but in Unreal it's visible. So usually it's fixed by just combining and then separating them. That should fix it. You can see they look a little bit weird, and that just happens basically like that. Now it's fixed. We can just add like that. And maybe have a drink. So this is how I sit and set dress basically with the camera shots in mind. We're gonna just do that, and then we're gonna start setting up the camera shots. There it's very easy to start modeling, but I want to kind of like fetch my size reference. So I always kind of do that, and then put the hand here to get like a bottle. Very easy for me to start kind of like go to detail mode, so I have to remind myself. I'm gonna do white and then just maybe orange, maybe green, just a complementary color. That's something I also do like this early, like trying different colors, which colors are kind of working well together. We can just put that here and maybe have one on the side. So for quite a long time, I kind of do build my whole scene like this in Maya and then just export it as a whole piece. And then, of course, splitting it up later. And we can look at the example quickly later, how that next step could look. So you can see that. Because we're not going to manage that time-wise. Now this gets cut off. So I'm not the biggest fan of that. Just going to fix that. Because I'm quite happy with the shot in general. Let's add a green there. So I would say let's set up cameras now, or rather kind of camera work. So when it comes to camera work, we have like a bunch of cool tools here that I rarely ever use. I would say I try to simplify my production for kind of camera work in my scenes as much as possible. And for me, I feel like I have a dolly cam by flying around like this. And I've done that for a long time. So for me, it feels very natural to kind of fly around and slowing down, speeding up by scrolling. So that's kind of my camera tool, basically, is kind of the control of Unreal here. So the first thing we want to create to start off is kind of like a master. I think they changed the name. They are not called a sequencer master anymore. It is called a level sequencer with shot. But back in the days, Unreal 4 and early Unreal 5, it was called a sequencer master. So still stuck in my head to call it that. We create this and we just click OK. And what that does is that we get basically something that can hold all our camera shots. We also get a folder called cinematic, and it's being placed here. And I usually just call this master. And I move this to sequencer instead, so I don't have to kind of click in this deep, so I have it here. The next thing I do is just delete all of this. And then it might be like, okay, we just add cameras and start working. But what I rather like to do is go here and add a level sequencer. And I create a level sequencer for each of my shots. And the reason why I do that is like later when we render, then I can pick each of these shots and just render them separately. And what I've kind of like experienced is that you're never gonna kind of like get from start to finish with a kind of sequence while working. One of the shots is always gonna kind of like have bugs and stuff like that. And it's quite nice to have like everyone separate so you can kind of focus work on one. But then of course, putting all of them in the master also. So what I usually do is I call this a sequencer, and then I just call it the name of the camera. Then I find them quite like they match basically perfect. So we can start with the main shot. So I'm going to just pull that in. It's added, and we have it here now. So right now nothing happens if I press play because we haven't keyframed anything. So the word keyframe you probably might have heard before. It's basically when we take any function here on the like function of the camera, and on the timeline we basically just set the value. And that could be like the transform, so the placement of the camera. And then we move in the timeline and we set another one, and that creates, of course, like a start and a finish line. Right now we have locked the camera, so I usually, when I work, lock the camera. So I'm gonna go to transform here and unlock it so I can work with it now. And the first thing I'm gonna do is just in the middle here, go to transform and click the middle button here. And you can see there is a yellow dot here now, and that's our keyframe. We can move around the keyframe and we can delete it. We can duplicate it also. So the first thing I like to do is just going further away. So let's say I'm quite happy with a shot. I always kind of move backwards. And what I do with my camera shots is always like adding a couple of seconds in both ends. And the reason is that I rather have a too long clip and cut it up later rather than having a too short clip and feeling like I need to re-render. And it comes down to like when I'm sitting in the cutting board and I had music and I want to make it longer to fit the music and stuff like that. Is there a better setup? Is it always better to set up the scene and move object in around? I would say that comes down to like just a workflow. So I wouldn't say there is a right or wrong there. The reason why I like to just work like this in the beginning is that I want to be flexible and just kind of like move it around before committing to these assets, basically. So I'm going to show later what the next stage for me would be in a blockout, and that would be to kind of separate everything and have them separated. I mean, I can open that quickly here so we can look at it. So here for another project, here I have separated all the objects, and they are moving over to Unreal now. So in Unreal, these are all separated. So that would basically be like when I'm happy with the composition, basically. So now these are all kind of each individual object that can move around in Unreal. And I would say that's usually final touches for me. But I usually like to kind of like figure out the main idea quick, like in Maya like this. For me, it's quite quick to kind of click that button and then just re-import. And then sometimes if it's too awkward, like then I just make it a single object. Like these trees, they were too awkward to do it. Then I separate it, or this island, for example. So I would say like case by case a little bit. Great question. But yeah, transform. So I move around back a little bit, set the keyframe, which means that I probably need to kind of like detail this a little bit. So I can move back still because I'm on the keyframe. So it's going to kind of get locked there or not. We need to delete it. So I need to move back, which means that I'm going to kind of work a little bit maybe extra here, or I'm going to just be fine that this is here. Another thing is that stuff loads in, so it's quite nice to just have this kind of dead space that they know it's not going to be part of the video, but it's there to be there. And the first thing we can do is just kind of like maybe fly towards the focal point a little bit, maybe move up a little bit so we're not cutting it. And I just click and let's see what happens. We need to let's see. Oh, I was not in transform. So let's go back. So I accidentally keyframed the focus distance and not the transform. So let's do this again. So I can see I dragged in the house, and that's why it's happening. So we have the camera now. I guess we have to add a transform now. That's has not been like that before. So we do the plus button and just add a transform, and now we have the transform of the camera. If you are older Unreal, it's probably already there, but newer ones, it seems like you have to click the plus button and add the transform here. So let's try this again. So we are position the shot a little bit again, where it was. Keyframe it, and then we move forward to the kind of like focal point. We press plus play. Let's see. I'm quite the question here. Why is this not working? Let's see. I'm gonna just delete the camera out of this sequencer. Let's try again. Now the transform is there. We're gonna just try quickly here and see if it works now. Yeah, now it works. Let's just delete this keyframe, and then we just do it again. We move back, set the keyframe, go forward in the shot, and set the keyframe. If I press play now, we have like a traveling shot basically. And we can play around with this a little bit. So what I like to do is I like to set up another camera here or another viewport. Because then I can control the camera here also. Right now we're moving just in one like straight line. And I would say like sometimes it's better to just simplify shots rather than to try to like do too complex things. So I think like a slow panning just frontal shot of your scene can usually be better than doing quite a lot of aggressive different shots basically. So I would say simplify where you can simplify. And I would say adding a lot of the extra camera shot comes when you have done a couple of scenes. So I would usually start with like some type of simplification basically. But what we can do is we can maybe kind of go down with the shot a little bit. It starts at the water, moves forward. The one thing I don't like is speed right now. So we can address that by pushing the keyframes further apart. I prefer that. A little bit too fast still. I'm gonna push them a little bit more apart. Can extend the clip a little bit if we want to see a little bit further. We can just try to push it a little bit further away. So I think like slow panning shots are quite nice when we want to present things. And usually with a portfolio scene, I think it's more about presenting rather than making a lot of dynamic cool shots, basically. So I think slowing it down Because remember, usually people see your scene for the first time, so they might need to take in everything. And usually you get the viewer for one couple of seconds. You want to make sure that they can see all the detail you worked on. So for portfolio work, I always recommend to go slower with the camera shots. So I would maybe slow this down even a little bit more. But we have our first shot. This is our kind of like main shot. We can tweak it, but I would say let's add another shot now. So like I said, we have that here now. We could go here to the master and add it into the master. You can drag it in here, and now it's confined here in the master, basically. So we're going to confine all our sequencer in the master. The master is going to be the parent, holding all our individual sequencer. And like I said, the reason is that then we can render the whole master if we need, but we can also render segments, basically. So I'm going to do next one, and we can do the top shot now. Now we got the transform here, so seems to still be that the transform follows there. So with this one, I'm going to unlock the transform. It's unlocked. So here I'm thinking maybe positioning it even a little bit more like this. And then basically having it kind of like travel like this. And then maybe start seeing palm trees. So I'm kind of usually flying around like this and figuring out the shot inside here. And what I'm holding in right now is like my right mouse click, and then just A and D basically. So I can kind of like move the camera side to side, almost like a camera DP, like a camera director, or what you call it in movie production. Like so I can basically plan ahead a little bit here. So I want to kind of start where we see this. I would maybe like already think about the seagulls. Like the seagulls are a quite cool part of the shot. So here they could maybe fly away already. And here in the water, we could maybe play with like coral reefs and fishes and stuff like that. So it feels a bit empty now, but I'm thinking of that already, basically. So keyframe that. And then we just fly until I see palm trees. Because I'm imagining these palm trees are going to kind of move around and give a cool effect. And we want that vibe basically in the shot, I feel like. So again, it's going to move very fast now. Not that nice looking, but I'm going to just bend these apart. Still too fast. I think it's very easy to, I always kind of like make it almost feel too slow, but I think it's going to be much easier for the viewer to take in the image then. Of course, we need to stretch the shot then if we want to make them see kind of what we plan. So I'm going to stretch it here. I'm basically making the shot longer. So now it starts here. Maybe the bird's going to fly away. And we can see the boat rocking here. And we have kind of like what we call the establishing shot. We want the palm tree, so I'm going to kind of like make the shot even longer. And maybe like in the cutting board, we feel like, okay, this is dragging on too long. Maybe the music can help to make it not feel like that. Then we can always kind of cut this. Maybe we cut a little bit of the beginning and stuff like that. But I think it's always good to have more than less for when we move over to the cutting board. Yeah, so let's add this one in the master now. So I like to have everything in the master because then I can check them towards each other. So one thing I would say is that we don't want like, so if I click this now, I'm inside of the master. So of course we get like an awkward cut here, but I don't worry about that because I know in the cutting board I can like make it more cleaner between. What I'm kind of looking at is like the speed of the camera. I don't want one camera to like go super fast and another camera goes super slow. Like I want some kind of like equal speed. I think this might be a little bit too fast still, but we're gonna keep it for now. Because I want to kind of just set up all our cameras first. Let's go to the next one. So let's do the plate first. So here I'm thinking maybe we can just zoom in slowly, like so we can use the scroll wheel for that. I'm gonna keyframe. So question here. I want to learn how to make terrains in a real engine. Any advice? So I would recommend to read up on Gaia. I always spell this wrong. Like this. So I would say this is kind of like the industry standard for doing terrain in Unreal. So usually you build the terrain in a software like this, and then you export the data of the height map to Unreal basically. Because then you get kind of like the really nice looking ones. Material like, and I think they have like a free test version if I remember correctly. So I would check this out. And the cool thing is that you have a lot of videos on how to set up this. Of course, I'm gonna link this. World Machine is another one. I would say this is a little bit like when I started. It's not as popular anymore. I would say kind of died down, and I would say Gaia is the new, like the most used one nowadays. Some studios use Houdini, but I wouldn't jump there. Houdini will make it a little bit too complex, I feel like. So I feel like Gaia, and then just search for Gaia to Unreal, and you have like bunch of videos that shows the process of creating quite nice looking terrain. So what you're doing is you're building the terrain in Gaia, and then you get like a height map, and you get something called a splat map. And this defines basically where the tileable textures go. So you're going to have like color maps that's being created in Gaia, and then you can just plug this into Unreal. And you define basically each color to a texture. You get like the rocks on a certain place, and you get the grass on a certain place, and it just feels very believable this way. It's a very cool workflow. I hope that helped. Let's see. So let's zoom in here. Kind of want the edge here still in the shot, I feel like. Let's do this for now. I feel like a little bit boring shot, but this is why I like to do this early. Just kind of like, I mean, I spent a couple of seconds on it. I would just try it basically. So that's why I kind of like don't bother by these kind of like camera rigs and stuff like that, because this is so much faster to set up shots. So I can kind of throw away much more because I don't invest that much time in the beginning here. And that's usually how I think about these things. So we can extend just the master and just add this one in. And of course, weird happening there, but we can always kind of fix that. So I feel like we have a little bit like this goes quite fast. and this goes very slow. So I would say we can maybe speed this up a little bit. So this is why I have the master to kind of check these. So I think this is fine for now. And now we do another one. Plate. Let's add the close-up of the plate. And here we can try a new thing called a camera shake. So I'm going to show how we set that up. So I already have one. So we can use search for blueprint class. A blueprint is basically just a way to program in Unreal, usually done by the technical designers and the programmers to create different functions. So when you have like a game and a lot of like different functions in the game, they are usually driven by a blueprint in Unreal. It's a node-based programming language, basically. But they have also, if we search for camera, different camera tools here, basically. If we go down here, we can add shake also, and we go down and search for camera shake base, select that one. Then we basically get the camera shake. So we're going to call this camera shake 1. And we don't have to like be too like much in here. Like here you would do that node-based programming. The only thing we need to do is go here to root shake pattern and add a Perlin noise camera shake pattern. You can even close this now and open it again, and then we just get like the things we need to change here basically. So now we don't even have to bother. And we can go to our camera. We can click the plus button and add camera shake, and we do the 1. If I click play now, we have a camera shake, but it stops here. So we can see it's just kind of like this small and then it stops. It's almost like a handheld camera feel basically, to get a little bit almost of a human touch. So first we want to kind of make the duration go the whole way, so we don't have to like scale this or for each shot. So what I'm going to do here, I've clicked up this, so I have this controller here. I can just go to timing here and zero out all of these, and we can see it's kind of covering the whole space now. And I'm going to compile this. Now the camera is moving kind of like. And a purling noise, can I explain that? Probably heard this word before. You have it basically in Designer also. It's basically one type of grayscale, basically, that's being used in a lot of different things. And it's basically just black-white in different layers, basically. So if we think this as kind of like numbers, and that's basically what this purling noise is doing, it's basically just panning inside of this texture. You can think basically, and hitting sometimes the black and sometimes the white, and that's what creates this kind of like effect basically. So it's kind of cool. We are using a picture to kind of drive this basically. But then we have a couple of functions here. We can kind of like lower the amount. We can make it much more shaky. And we have settings also in the pitch and the jaw. So if I zero these out, or see, we're gonna do it here, 0, 0, 0. I usually don't sit that much in this one anymore because I usually just bring this over from my past project, basically. So let's see. You can just lower this number. Yeah, so here we can see what it's doing. So we can put this on 1-1. So the pitch is basically up and down. And this is kind of what programmer use as a language also. Pitch up and down. If we do this one, this is side, jaw. And this is not so. And then we have this turn also. So we can sit here and tweak this a lot, like until it feels right. And I think also like online you can like read up on like different like depending on what we want to create as effect, we can kind of like play around with this. But let's keep it simple. I want quite subtle. And the idea is to like why I have this close up is one, of course, I want to tell like a story of this person eating pizzas and drinking beers, but also like in terms of I always kind of think also in terms of my portfolio. Like in the end, like we are creating portfolios to land jobs. So I think it's good to think about also like these shots as almost like a presentation of texturing skill and prop skills. So these props are in the end going to be the ones I'm focusing on pushing the furthest compared to maybe shots like props that would be further away, like the palm trees. They're quite far from any camera. So I'm probably going to try to use less time building them. And this is why I really like to set up this camera very early on. So I kind of think almost like in terms of production time, that the pizza slice should have more care to them in terms of like detail than the palm trees, because the palm trees are quite far away. And that's why I think it's very good to if the goal is, of course, having this on ArtStation and having it as a portfolio piece. I would say if we just do this like for fun as a camera shot, then I would just go at it basically. But if we are planning it for kind of portfolio, that's kind of like how I usually have my mind on it. So let's add our which one was it? This one? No, close up was it? Now we can look at them together. I feel like this is kind of like the end shot, so I'm gonna already put that in the end, like. So something I'm kind of like doing now is also get a feel of like length of stuff like that. Like what does feel too long and stuff like that. So one thing I'm already thinking is like it would be nice to have an introduction to the scene. Like starting like this is a little bit too big, I feel like. Oops. So I'm gonna move this and I want to have one more new shot. So I'm gonna take the close-up cameras. We could do like these boxes, but I feel like they are not that fun. I feel like the birds are more fun as a starting point, like maybe something like this even. That kind of like almost like titles the video almost. So let's kind of like work on this. So we have close up birds. And here we could maybe blur this background even more. You remember aperture? And then we could maybe like unblur it in the shot. Like that could be kind of cool. Like do that as a transition almost. So let's add another level sequencer. So here I feel like a camera shake, kind of like the idea of the camera shake, also like blurring to water in that sense also. I kind of want to have a camera shake here, so I'm going to do camera. That's very, I'm going to see my other camera shake. That does. And what we can do now is try to get this to become sharper, basically. So it's the aperture here. So we could basically keyframe that. So I'm keyframing the beginning. And then the end here. And I want to try to have a little bit movement in a shot. I feel like a little bit, maybe it's doesn't hurt. So we can try that. So I'm going to kind of just do this and then move forward and keyframe it and see what happens. Maybe. Gonna try without again. Of course, there is no right or wrong answer here. It's kind of like just feels basically, and what we want to kind of after. I feel like the camera shake is a little bit too little, so I would probably like address that a little bit. We can click this button. I think it's a loop now. It's looping. So if you click this, basically it's loops. And we can go. So I don't have my kind of typical camera shakes because I'm on a new computer, so I don't have my old scenes. So I haven't moved them over yet. So we're gonna have to kind of like tweak these quick ones, basically. I think that's fine for now. So let's add that into our master now. I think we already have it here in the master. And we click this one because right now we are in our bird camera shot. So we need to click this one to get to the master, basically. Now we're going to play the master. So already that's too long, but we can cut that out later. This is also a little bit too long, I feel like. A little bit too fast also, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I want that tree there, so I'm gonna maybe push them closer. So that's also something I'm kind of thinking of is like I might need to like readjust the scenery like in itself to make it work basically. I'm not the biggest fan of like driving into that pole also. Like that's a little bit almost like funny. So I wonder if we could start. I'm gonna jump into this camera now and start a little bit to the side instead. And this is just a lot of tweaking over and over again. I'm gonna, and here we can always kind of, another trick I like to do is like take the camera, main camera, and I can move kind of in this space also. keyframe that, fly forward, and not going into that pole now. Let's see how this feels. So now the poles are kind of like on the side of this picture. That's more fine for me. And kind of cool, like this floor could be quite detailed in detail also. So one thing that itches me a little bit now is that the chimney is just perfectly kind of like cutting with a frame. It's almost like what we would call the tangent. I want to fix that. We're going to put the keyframe like this instead. I think it could be quite nice to end here. Like having the trees here. So I need to push this further away. So yeah, I think we have a beginning. I'm going to delete our size reference. Like these I would always have in the blockout early on, but for the video we're going to just delete it. And then we can go back to the master. Click on this to see the master again. We're losing the beginning here a little bit too much, I feel like, so I'm going to extend this clip a little bit. So what I'm missing a little bit is the kind of like up here would be nice to see a little bit at least. And move backward maybe. And start kind of like here. Like this might become too awkward. Like I try to avoid having too many of these kind of like too many keyframes in one shot and putting them in different transforms. So I think this is fine for now, but I would sit and tweak to kind of get back that framing device. We're losing the birds also, which is not that nice. Let's try this one more time. Like go back to here basically. The reason why I'm pushing down the camera is kind of nice reveal shot, like looking at the water and then going up a little bit, is the idea. It's tricky to get right, but I would say because we want to go to the next phase also. So the nice thing is we can tweak this after because we have separated all shots, so we can always kind of like keep working on this. But I want to show how I export this now and go to the next step of finishing kind of a video. So we have the master now. And now we want to export this. And it might be easy to click this and export it. Or this we should actually click. But I know there is another way of kind of saving, I think. Everything is just a video clip. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to render out the video as a video clip. And the reason is that if you have lag, any type of lag is going to be visible in the video clip. So, and it's very easy that you get lag when you have like a stuck scene with stuff. Or if the computer starts calculating, it's going to kind of lag. So what we want to do is we want to export everything as single images and then put them together again, basically. So we are basically rendering out each frame as an image, and that way we are combating lag and getting much more crisper detail, basically. So we're gonna go to the movie render queue. You're not gonna have this one, so you need to go to plugins, movie render queue, and click this and restart. Then you're gonna have it up here in window, movie render queue, and probably it's gonna be 0 here. So we're gonna click the master, and we click here to get to the options. So when it comes to the options, I'm going to link a really good YouTube channel. I can do that right away. If you want to have like more, I would check out William Faucher. When it comes to like bunch of different good practices when it comes to Unreal cinematography. That's his job, and he's great at explaining it. So I would recommend everyone to check out his YouTube channel. Really good stuff there. But we're gonna kind of do it simple now. I would say usually we pick between EXR or like a image type. EXR is if we want to like really kind of tweak the colors and stuff like that in our movie tool program, basically. But I kind of want just to have it out as images as simple as possible to kind of stitch them together and start building our sequencer in the other program. So I usually work with PNG in the beginning, and then sometimes I might jump over to EXR if I know that I'm going to do a lot of color correction and stuff like that. Then we can do color output. That one is if we are using EXR, I think. So we can turn that off for now. We need to have also anti-aliasing. So this is like how sharp the image is, like how, like we can see there is flicker and stuff like that, like how that's going to be combated, like the lines, how they are going to be smoothened, because we are working with pixels. So as far as I remember, this number we put higher if we want to have something that is a little bit like a calm shot, basically, like what we are doing. And this number we're going to have kind of lower. I would say like 8 is usually a good kind of starting point. And then we get an error here, but we just click in this. 8 is a starting point, and then I usually go up. And I flip this if we would have maybe more action shot with a lot of motion blur and stuff like that. So I'm gonna go there. And then the last one we want to do is, so I know if you maybe have sit, very common to do this one and then add bunch of commands that we find online. Usually we don't know what the commands are doing. And I think William Faucher made a great video on this, that it's become a thing to kind of use the Google, the consoles that put here without knowing what they do. And I think his recommendation is great. And that's kind of like, don't put in things you don't know what they're doing. So I usually kind of like keep this empty. And if I have bugs, I add stuff in here. Because then I figure out what is kind of like a command that can fix the bug. But it can be good to have this here. And then if needed, we can add console commands here, basically. Like here. So we could add different console commands if needed here. But I keep this empty in the beginning always. But we want also the game overrider. So this one is going to do what's kind of like I think a lot of people do here, and that's basically just pushing everything outside of game. Basically, this one basically just takes and make everything the highest quality in the render, basically the game overwriter. And then we can save this as a preset and have that for the future. We have also output, so here we can set if we want to do 4K. In the beginning, I just work with like standard resolution like this, and then I might put it higher later. So I think I have the lobster project here. We can do rendering as a new folder. And then I'm going to do movie render queue, master 01. So I don't know how long the render is going to take here. I don't hope we sit here and watch a render for a long time. Before I click render, I'm going to save all. But this is fairly a small scene, so let's hope we're not sitting here for hours now. So local versus remote. As far as I understand, remote means that it's just closing down your Unreal and opening up a new Unreal and rendering it like that. Local, then you just render purely in here. Remote also could be that you're hooking up other computers to the render. I usually go with local. It takes a little bit of time, and then we're starting to get an estimation time here. So right now it's at 2 minutes. I think we can wait that. In the meantime, I'm very bad at waiting for stuff. I usually start setting up DaVinci. We're going to use DaVinci for our editing. It's a free software used by Hollywood, like it's industry standard. The reason why this can be free is you can see here Alien Romulus, Deadpool. Basically, many productions use this. The difference is that we have a free version that has everything we need as environment artists that putting it on ArtStation compared to like movie production. Even movie production is quite cheap software, but I just use the free version. I never felt, very rarely I felt like I needed the bot version. So check that one out, and we can just open a new project, and we are met here. And then we can go back and see where we are at. 30 seconds left. If we go here to our desktop, our lobster project, and then our rendering, we can see it's saving out every image here, basically. Totally okay. I would say use the software you are most comfortable, and After Effects is great also. I would say use the one you are kind of the fastest with. So Final Cut Pro would also work. But yeah, we have everything now. What I usually do now is basically just go here to cut, select all of these images, and just pull them in. Oops. I'm going to delete this. I do it here in media. Drag them in. No. Maybe it's in editing. Because we want them to turn into a video, basically. I'm going to delete this. Okay, we are in the master. Let's see. I'm going to do it here. I'm going to just drag it in here instead. Like that. Now it became a video. It's actually cut up everything for us. Into sequence 1 and 2. So we have the video now that we created. And we have a bit bugs there, and it's a little bit slow at some points. Like this is dragging on too long. People would click out here. So this needs to be shorter. I'm getting hungry, so that's good. Means that this shot works. Probably gonna be pizza tomorrow, I'm guessing. And then we have the nice water reflections, and then we're moving closer, and we're getting the reveal of the lobster landing restaurant. Cutting out there, which I don't like. Let's see. So we have our first bug. We're gonna check that out now. Okay, it's not a bug. I just need to extend the video. Like I said, I don't like that it's just cutting there in the top. So I need to extend the master. Now it would be annoying to kind of like like that. It's much nicer. So now it would be annoying to like re-render the master again, and this is why I like to have these kind of like shots separated. Because now I can kind of go here, close this, and just render the master, and use the same preset we set. Remember the output is set here, so we need to kind of set that. So I'm gonna do master 2, which means like version 2, and then we have main 1. They are ending up in sequencer. And then we can just render this out. While that's rendering, I'm gonna jump over here, and we're gonna start cutting. So we can zoom in here. And the first thing I want to do is just cutting this up, so we have every shot as one shot, like these are connected now. I'm gonna just click here, and then the razor blade here, and then clicking here. And that means that we have separated them to 2 shots. And here I'm gonna already kind of like shorten this quite a lot. So I'm gonna kind of, I'm thinking like it would be nice to not show the reveal before kind of the person seeing the shot. So the reveal of the name of the place, Lobster Landing. And then I feel like the tree idea we can add later, but right now the shot is a bit too long. So I'm gonna kind of like work more with like when the building has been revealed. So I'm gonna kind of close that off. Now we have this, and then this shot. And we are at 10 seconds here. This is a bit too long, so I'm gonna already cut this. Gonna here, and then cut here, and we can delete this part. Same here. I feel like we can cut this quite drastically. And the main shot, I heard the computer slowing down, so I know it's done. We can go in here, select all of these. So I know there is a setting where you can drag that and that doesn't happen. So right now we just do this and it fixes it. But there is a DaVinci setting that you can just drag and this. So I'm going to delete this. So drag them just to the timeline and it's going to create a video of it. But it's kind of nice. We get the whole building now as a shot. So what I want to do now is kind of like show what I do in DaVinci. So one thing that can be nice is not having kind of hard cut here. Like one thing is could be nice is to ease into the image. So you can see like when I hover here, there is kind of like levers here. So I can kind of pull these, which means that we can kind of get a fade in. So I don't set my fades in Unreal. I do it here in the DaVinci instead. And we can fade in between pictures also. So I can kind of pull these. So there is a fade between these. And then we see here kind of comes down like to like every shot doesn't need to have a fade. Maybe it's fitting for the like a scene. I feel like this is still too long, so I'm gonna kind of cut this a little bit up. Because we have like two pizza shots, so I feel like we have like the stabbing shot here. Like already, like sitting in here, I can like start thinking already like it would be nice to maybe have this kind of sunbathe stool having maybe a towel. Maybe we could have like a bottle of sun cream, maybe glasses that has like lobster hands, like starting to kind of come up with fun ideas how we can kind of create personality into these shots. And that's why I like to have these shots this early. Like they are still a bit bare, but they're here for me as a canvas now. For example, here I could imagine like maybe the birds being animated and maybe like move their arms or something, or maybe look towards the distance and then towards the lobster store when it becomes sharp. So maybe they are kind of looking around, and then really to push the viewer when this becomes sharp, they are looking at the sign. And I think coming up with these ideas is much easier when we have this in front of us. And having this in front of us before we have like you start building everything. Like the cool thing is that we can do a block out like this very early and just coming up with ideas. And I mean, we could add in more. So, like I said, like here I'm already having kind of like new ideas of like the sunglasses that have maybe a lobster theme to them. Maybe we have the towel have like lobster a pattern to them, so it's kind of like a person who is like lobster obsessed almost, and that's why this is the best restaurant of a lobster in the world, basically. So yeah, we have the fades here. Here I would maybe want to have a fade in, like that's kind of nice. And then here I kind of want like fade into the reveal shot. And this reveal shot, I feel like can start maybe a little bit later. And I feel like the reveal shot goes a little bit too far. Like I would slow that down a little bit, and these things are so much easier to feedback for myself when I'm kind of like having this in front of me. And what I could do now already is kind of like, let's see, you're gonna grab website here that I sent to another student. Because we were talking about the music, and I think we talked about where we can find royal-free music. So I'm gonna see if I can find that in our chat here quickly. Yeah, here. So maybe we could start adding in music already and start planning that, and that could also like add to figuring out things. So calm. I don't know if you hear the music in the recordings, like if that's set up. I would sit like this. So we can do summer maybe, and calm, vacation. And I can say this is maybe the thing I'm spending the most time. I can sit for days and looking for the perfect song. That's why I just usually start with this like early in production. and I sit. I usually use what's called epidemic music, I think. But that's like a monthly subscription. I usually go and do that monthly subscription when I do a new project, and just listen through and kind of fuse myself into the vibe of the scene. Because there is a lot of music that doesn't work. I mean, this is kind of okay, so we can try that just to see basically. But let's do vacation also. Gonna add calm. I done this for a long. I can hear like in the first second if it's gonna work or not. Kind of like this. This is a little bit like retro. This is like a 64 retro. It's kind of popular now, the music. Beachside reflection. So let's do one more. This one is silent. It's loading now. I hope I don't lose internet. But we have two, so I think that's fine. So what we can do now is we can just go here and put these into our rendering, and then we add music. So I think like keeping a good folder structure is a good practice. I would recommend everyone to do that, like not just having these lying around and then accidentally deleting them. In your project, kind of like always keeping everything clean and nice and tidy. And I think it's just also a good practice when you're like entering the industry, having this with you. I think it's a rare thing and usually very kind of like a very big positive. Because I mean, I'm an artist myself, so I know kind of the urge of just throwing things around, and I'm trying to always kind of better myself by doing this in projects. So the question is, thank you. So basically, this is not final. This is basically a blockout that like it was like 2 hours yesterday and two like what did we spend? Like before this, I spent maybe a half hour, an hour. So it's very early in production. And now I have like all the camera shots. And the reason why I don't like build the finish and then set up the cameras is because like now I can kind of like figure out every object I need to build basically. Because I have everything in front of me here now, what I need to build. And of course, like I would sit a little bit longer and add more story beats here. But the idea is to create every frame and then knowing exactly what we need to build. And I can show that from another project I'm working on. I'm just going to add the music in here and we can look at that. So I can show kind of like how the next step would be basically in terms of a portfolio work. So let's add the music in. So I'm going here to render, music, and I'm going to just drop this in here. And we can kind of ease that in also. And here I kind of spend also time to like look at the high notes and kind of like I would maybe like move around and make some clips longer to make that like that new kind of sound be be part of the kind of switch off to our camera. But that would be like a little bit more kind of take a little bit longer to set up. So we can add the other song and to try that. I'm gonna mute this one and add the other one. So I listen to this type of music quite a lot when I build, so I kind of like this. Oh, gonna cut it because we have a beginning that's kind of like silent. Oh, you're not hearing the audio. Let's see if I can solve that. Thank you for saying that. Can we set that up? Let's see. Sharing. Share sound. Okay, I'm setting that up. Thank you, Danny. So I'm resharing. Does it work now? Awesome. Thank you for letting me know. But yeah, I would spend I wouldn't just pick a song like this. Like I usually through the project just find more and more music until I'm happy. Because I feel like music plays a big role if you want to really create the right ambient for your video. Like this song is too kind of linear for me. I like to have like in and outs that I can kind of bound to the video clip. So something like that, like these things. Like that would be a perfect perfect place to kind of like add into the shot. So we could try to put that and try that here. So I'm gonna lower the clip. So that thing basically, like, and we can drive like the reveal even more with the music. And I mean, we could lower this music and add in like ambient from the world also. We could have like the bird sounds, the water, and mix those things together also. So yeah, I'm gonna cut these and then we're gonna render this out. So let's say we're happy with the result, and then we just go to the deliver tab. We have like a color correction tab here. I would say this one can be nice to kind of dabble around. I tend to try to push my images quite a lot with just the basic lighting in Unreal, and then sometimes I kind of increase here. And the nice thing with DaVinci is that you have a bunch of like YouTube videos that are bound to movie production and color correction that can kind of be watched, and you can kind of push, you can kind of sharpen images and stuff like that. So a question here. Basically, it's like a storytelling. Do you think it works for architecture exterior where polygons becomes extremely higher? What configure? I mean, like if we jump to my portfolio, like like when I've moved over to like building this finished, it's gonna kind of be towards more kind of semi-realism or realism, basically. So this is gonna kind of like what we have done is basically this, but stylized to begin with. So I kind of like set it up this simple, and then it's kind of gets this complex in the end. Because we don't want to add complexity in the beginning, because complexity will lock us down. Like if I build all these assets super complex and then set up the cameras, it's much harder to kind of like change things. Like you become too locked down to your ideas then. But if we do it this early, we like the pizza took 2 minutes to build, I can scrap that pizza and add a pie instead. And that's the mindset, basically, that we become much more flexible with building our shot composition this way. I would say like Unreal, I used like my computer was quite old, like before I switched. I switched now quite recently. Got a little bit coffee here. Gonna just take a sip. I switched quite recently to a better computer, and that's because I'm streaming now also, and I had problems streaming and opening up some student project could be a little bit unoptimized. I would say if you work fairly optimized, I think you can use a quite simple computer, but I think you can just search on Unreal Engine, low spec, and you get kind of like a good answer what you need to have. So I think it's fairly like you can run it on fairly low. I think DaVinci is like even less like demanding. One tip I would give to you, Sandeep, is when I worked on my old computer, I could have a lot of lag while working. It was a little bit older. Then I usually go here to viewport scalability and just had that on a lower setting because you barely see any difference. And I worked with that lower setting for like when working. So here and then viewport, and you can also like do screen percentage and lower that, and that's gonna also like increase your frame rate. So I did that a lot when I had like my old computer. And then for the render, remember we have the render set to overdrive here or over. And what this means is basically what this setting does is basically just taking these settings and put them on cinematic. So I usually work in lower res to get better FPS. So we can get an FPS counter, I think, if we search FPS here. So here I have 120 basically. And this is also a reason why I like working this simple in the beginning, like we have less lag. And no worries. But yeah, we're gonna render this out. So like I said, if you want more kind of like deep dive into this, I'm gonna be honest, I don't use it that much. Probably gonna try to start using it more because I think like color correction can be a cool thing to learn. I've used it mainly like to sharpen, and if I have dark scene, like brighten them a little bit. But I try to like push the color quite a lot in my shots already. But they could probably be enhanced with color correction here. And then delivery, what we want to do here. So we do lob. And name it lobster render 1, QuickTime or MP4 I pick between. That because like some websites don't take QuickTime and some not MP4. I can't remember which one, so I usually just switch between these if I need to put them on certain websites. And then just H.264, and you just keep all the other ones. If we are rendering out the 4K, we have to remember to project and set that on 4K and apply, but we are rendering on small, like on 1920 right now. And then we just pick where we want to render it out. So Project Lobster, rendering, and here I'm going to do, I usually call this final. And then we can just have it like straight in here. This is okay. That's scary. Let's put it just, okay, let's see. Not sure why it didn't want to be put here. Okay, now it worked. Then we just add to render queue. Okay, another question here. Great timing and follow-up to that question. He was already asking. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, for me, this is kind of like a tool for early production. And then basically, if I have all these cameras set up and stuff like that, I can just work on the art and just detail that, and all the cameras are there, and I can just render it out later. So in the end, basically, if we look at kind of like my movies here, like this is kind of like what we did with seagulls, but here I have like a bird flying past and a little bit camera shake. So kind of basically the same. And I'm going to be honest, like this technique I have like developed more and more. So in the beginning, I kind of like just built and like added camera shots later and like added like weeks or months extra work. And it was just kind of frustrating, like because I felt like for the story I needed another shot, but I know, okay, if I do this shot, I add another month of work. And this is why I kind of changed my approach a little bit and really trying to like plan ahead before committing to kind of like all the kind of prop making and stuff like that. Especially if we do it for portfolio, we like especially like these close-up shots are very kind of like expensive to build like time-wise, like these shots. Because it's like or even worse is like when you go this close, then you have to like sit and really texture things. Uh, so I always try to like be mindful of that in production. And then I usually set up this prop list where I can kind of like so this is like early blockout prop list, but I can show how that can look a little bit more in. Let's see, give me a second here. I think I can bring it up here maybe. Yeah, like this. So this is kind of like how I plan out during production then later. So blockout, I kind of finish that first and then proxy, which I'm going to show now. And that way I can kind of like have in front of me how many assets I have. And I can just say, yeah, I want to finish this scene in 2 months. And I can just I can just take the amount of props and put that into days of how many days I'm going to spend. And I know exactly how much time I have on each prop. But I can show, after we're going to render this out, I'm going to show kind of like the next step, basically. How do you keep objects simple with high resolution detail normal maps from Substance? Will this work seamlessly? So I'm not exactly sure, like, how do you keep, oh, you mean like how I'm keeping them optimized, Sandeep? Like making sure that they're optimized, but also look high resolution. Is that your question? Like for performance? But to answer that, what I would say is like what you want to really think of is something called texel density and working in confinement of texel density. I think we can't like really go too deep into texel density because it's going to be a long discussion. But this is part of optimization when it comes to prop, I would say. I would basically recommend to read Beyond Extend, but I would say this is kind of like the main below. Yeah, I mean, I would say like you do a mixture between. I mean, like the objects are not going to look this low poly later. Like we're gonna, if we pick these pizza slides, we're gonna probably like photo scan these, like from real pizza slides. We're gonna maybe build like a high poly and bake this down to a low poly. Um, and basically detail that way. And then of course we need to kind of like keep in mind our texture resolution, and that would be like texture density. I can show another example from Blender, a way like I usually go about that. So here in blogs. And one thing is like with my like in the past I wrote blogs and I kind of missed that. So for my current project, I'm going to start writing a blog again. Then you're going to see all my steps basically. So I'm going to try to like really go from start to finish with a blog for my next or my current scene. But here I did like a supernatural scene, still in production. I never finished it, but it's almost done. We can actually open that scene, and you can see kind of like where, because objects are kind of like, let's see, which page is it? It was a long time since yeah. So objects are this simple, and then kind of they become textured and detailed. And another workflow I did with this one in particular in Blender was to kind of build the low poly and the high poly with a modifier stack. So taking the block out and turning it to a high poly and baking them in between, and that way getting kind of like high detail props quite quickly. But yeah, we can jump to my current project and can just talk about like what I would do basically when I want start kind of splitting these up. So if we jump here and we jump to Project Zorn, so that's kind of my project I'm gonna spend my evenings on now. And this project is a quite large project. The idea is to build almost like a playable environment. So I've set up a couple of cameras here, but I haven't like really figured them out completely here. So I'm still kind of like exploring different camera angles. But what I want to show here, no problem. Great questions. I think that's the big part there is that your questions gives me it makes it much easier for me to explain things basically. So thank you for that. But yeah, so here we can see I'm basically just separating all the props. So that would be like what we did like with the pizza slides and the chair boxes and stuff like that. That's the next step here. So kind of like splitting up everything to single props that have a good pivot. So almost like having them as props here. And the big advantage here is that, I mean, I'm not done yet. Like I'm still in that time of production, basically, where I'm kind of blocking out everything and figuring out all the assets and like placing them in the world here. So here I started to kind of like, it's basically a painter's house or farm basically. And inside here is the painter's studio. But each object here is a single object now. And the big advantage here is that I get like a list of all the props and I have the number. So right now I'm at 57 props, which is quite a lot of number. So that kind of gets me thinking, like planning wise, like I'm going to write down all the objects here, and I have like my idea list here. So this list is kind of just ideas, what I would like to have. And I kind of like green mark them when I have done this simple version of them and place them in the environment. I'm not going to do all of these, like this is too much, but that way I kind of just build a very simple version of something and I kind of just can place it in the world and I can fill up the world. I use this in production also. Like it's super powerful to be able to kind of run around in an environment and just kind of remembering that this is going to be kind of like realistic graphics later. And of course, it takes a little bit like extra kind of mindset to that. but the idea is that I can run around here and just see in front of me, like this is going to be like a Ubisoft style of graphics later. But the nice thing is I can just start checking like sizes of things. I get a sense if like things are too small or too big to run through here. And I can just get a sense of am I filling out the objects enough and stuff like that. So I'm basically having all the vegetation left to fill out. So going to be like farmland here with a lot of vegetation, and I'm going to block that out. That's going to be my weekend. But yeah, I just wanted to show, kind of like to explain what the next step would be there. So I think we can open up the render and look at what our final result was. And I would usually have like a sequence like this quite early, because now I can look at this. I can maybe send it to friends and see what they say, with like the caveat to say that okay, remind them that like this is a blockout still, but I can get the sense like they say it's too long or it's too short. I don't understand this, etc. It's a tool for me to feedback from myself, but also from other. So yeah, I would say this kind of like ends up being the demo. But I would say we can spend a little bit time if there is any kind of questions about this or anything else. So feel free to write if you have any questions. Gonna wait a couple of minutes if someone is writing, but if there is no questions, it seems like everything is fairly clear. Now. So I would say like I usually don't work with characters. I have never had to think about that basically. So I don't have a good answer there actually. Like I never worked with characters in my scene. It's a great question. I know that you I know that Unreal nowadays have like that you can hook up like face, like you can use your phone to record your face expression and sync that with like animation and get really good results that way. But I haven't played around with it. I'm actually planning on having a character in this scene. Like that's going to be something new I want to explore, but I haven't worked with it so far. So sorry, I don't have a better answer there. But I would say there is one YouTuber that does a lot of that. I can see if I can find him quickly. I'm searching here on the side because he does a lot of like yeah, this guy. He might have videos on this topic. So I'm gonna link this guy to you because he works more towards like movie production with Unreal. So he has great stuff on those topics. Let's see. No question, but no worries. Thank you for showing up, Danny. And then can you use this method in game? Yeah, I would say so. Like, of course, you need to hook it up with like blueprints and stuff like that. And you will probably hook it up like with I haven't done that much, to be honest, but you hook it up with a blueprint and like you make like a sphere or like a volume that the player walks into, and then you kind of just start the sequencer. I kind of did that actually. You see, like I did like a bunch of game jams this spring for myself. But it was on my old computer, so I don't know if I have the videos. And I kind of used the same system then, and it kind of worked quite nicely. And I just hooked it up with on a blueprint, and then just auto-played it when the player walks into that volume, basically. So great question here. Does your third point of view versus one like a third person view versus first person view change my approach? So I would say not that much actually. Like the last games I worked has all been first person games. Like I worked on Walking Dead and then Avatar and then Alara, and all of them were first person games. In Alara, where I started to use this system a little bit more because I was part of like kind of a lead and stuff like that, I could kind of implement it. We kind of built like this in the end, and it worked very nicely because we could kind of get the team to play the game in maybe like looking like this. And I mean, this is maybe 2 weekends of work, so you can get something kind of working quite nicely. And of course, it looks stylized, but you just have to explain that this is kind of just the surface, basically. And then, but what you can explore here is it's kind of like easy to move around here. Do you feel like as a player you can like explore and find stuff and navigate? Like for a competitive shooter, it's even more important. Like we worked on, where like every angle needed to be fair and stuff like that. So we kind of blocked out very, very kind of like simple in the beginning, and then just added detail on top of it later, basically, because it kind of had to kind of go back and forth a lot between the level design and the environment art. But then I think that's the nice thing for me, that this approach works the same basically for third and first person game. I would say like when I work on portfolio, I usually work with like third person in mind. And the reason is that I kind of just like, I think it's just because I don't work that much on third person games so far. I kind of like to do something different at home. But it's much easier to kind of just check scales and stuff like that when walking around, I feel like. I can just see if things feel kind of correct. And then also like detail wise, I don't have to push details as much. Like if you work on a first person, of course your camera is going to be much closer to this barrel. So this barrel needs to be much more detailed. So of course you need to spend more time. That's why like first person games are usually more expensive in production, because every object is closer to the camera, so they need more time. No worries. Thank you for tuning in. After blockout, when is it time to add more detail to environment like the house? How do you do that without deleting the blockout? Great question. So I would say for me it's kind of like a week or two more on working on this. I can open the Maya file on one of these buildings and we can look at it. Here I actually have like all the Maya files for each building, and I save quite extensively because I can go back and show people the process. But basically what I do now is I'm just like, especially because this project is quite large, like it's several houses and stuff like that. Right now I'm just kind of figuring out the sizes of everything. So I'm kind of modeling until I'm happy with like me running against this. And then after I'm done with that, I'm going to split this up to modularity. So what I can show first is, see, I'm going to open my meter board here. So this is kind of the planning of this project. So I still have a lot of reference here to clean up and put in the right order. But basically, I've kind of like mapped out everything when it comes. So this is a real place, by the way, by a Swedish painter that lived here 100 years ago, but everything is kind of still untouched. It's basically exactly how it was back 100 years ago. And my idea is to cover basically like you're playing when he's still alive, basically here. So kind of the heydays of this painter's life, and you will kind of walk around in this place basically. But yeah, I sit basically and model, and I mean it's fairly close to what this is and figuring this out. And when I'm happy with this kind of block out, I call it, or detail block out maybe, or art block out. I call it proxy model, so I feel like it's bit bigger difference than usually in the industry we call it art block out or color block out. I've heard every studio call it differently, I would say. But we have my collections here that I'm gonna link for anyone that wants to check these out. I save these mainly for students to kind of see stuff. I have like a collection for every type of subject matter in video games. So here we have foliage and so on. So character, concept, wireframe, materials. Here we have uni portfolio props, but we can check out modularity. So this would be the next step basically, to cut up all these buildings to these kind of segments. And this is much easier to do when they are as simple they are. And then later they will be assembled like this basically. And if we look at like, I think Indiana Jones is a great example from Machine Game. I think they actually have quite similar workflow what I do here, but they do it a little bit like more kind of detailed. So you can see they kind of like work similar, like without texture and modeling very detailed until they are happy with the result. I'm imagining, like I don't know exactly, but it looks like that for me. So they are kind of exploring with simple shapes like I'm doing, but the difference here is I'm adding a little bit color, but the workflow is the same, and this is kind of the level I'm gonna go to, like same with like having everything there, and then eventually like you add just the layer on top of the finished art, and it's gonna kind of just look textured and finished. It's just a production tool, I would say. And of course, I think like I didn't start doing this when I did my first scene, so it just comes from many scenes where I have to redo stuff and work on stuff that never been seen, and I'm kind of just want to work as smart as possible. I love this post from Alan Wake from Raja here, where you can see a little bit the same approach. So basically what I'm doing here, so we can see this from Alan Wake here, where we have these simple versions of the building and the simple versions of every prop. And then eventually it becomes this detail basically when the blockout is done and committing and texturing everything. So just kind of a first step in the next step basically. I hope that explained the question, Mariam. So next question, Miro looks great. I try it, but I don't use it often. I use PureRef. Miro looks similar with so yeah, Miro, the reason why I use Miro, like I use PureRef also, like when working, I have PureRef on, like when I was blocking this out, I had these pictures because it's a faster tool, I feel and I can zoom in. I can kind of like you have different functions that is a bit faster. I feel like you have this kind of like, I can't remember the shortcuts now, but you can kind of like yeah, you can kind of like do this, which is kind of cool, and you can kind of block out on top of this. So I love PureF. But I would say like when working in a team, you can't use PureF because if you lose the PureF, it's gone forever. That's why I love Miro, because it's hooked up to the internet, so I can never lose this. I can open this on my iPad if I need to pitch this to someone. And I have planning tools here. So I would say Miro board is more my project tool, and PureF is more like when I work on a single thing, basically. So usually what I do is just hopping over these images basically when I'm working. So tomorrow I think I'm gonna focus a little bit on the farmhouse, or what you call this, and I'm gonna just move this over to PureF while I'm working on them, so I can zoom in, because I feel like Miro is a little bit too laggy to just use while working. But it's great to kind of like save everything, I feel like. And then I usually do like these type of planners. So this is part of like the boot camp, so I kind of put like where we are basically in the timeline. So the idea is to try to finish this until like the end of January. Yeah, and then I can kind of like plan. For example, I'm planning the idea is to do a blog post, like I said, with this project, so I can plan that back here, like pictures and stuff like for that. So I can just gather everything here without losing it. So that's kind of why I love Miro that much. And also like I can share this with students so they can jump in and be part of it also. So every student that I work with have a Miro always, so I can kind of comment and stuff like that on what they're doing. So Miram next. But after modularity, can you still use Game Exporter and place asset into the blockout of Unreal? Yes. So I wonder how I can show this the best. Let's see. Let's jump to live demo. I think we did it, or we can jump to term 2 project here and see if I can show it here the best. And like I said, I'm happy to see if I can kind of steal yesterday's recording to show kind of lobster beginning modeling, because I kind of do a live modeling on how I did that blockout. And I can share that in the mail that's going to get sent out for you guys. So here we have a little bit levels. I'm trying to remember here a little bit where we are. Yeah, so here we have like a Ghibli scene that I blocked out for a class recording. And here we can see kind of like the next step, everything being kind of like pieces like this, like the modularity. So we have every piece separated like this, and we have the camera shots exactly the same. Setting up 3 camera shots to make interesting angles. And here we have every object being used for the scene basically. So I have the trees separated, like the car here. And every object here is on the grid, like usually 4 meters. And I can open the Maya file here. And you can see basically that this still works with a game exporter. So I have the pivots cleanly like this. So let's say we want to move this to the middle instead. Or I will get the feedback to move that, and I can just open a game exporter, and I can click my script there. And then if everything is hooked up, we should, if we re-import this, get them in the middle there instead. So this one lost its color, so I'm going to just add that in here. But you can see it still kind of works. And that way I can kind of just sit and detail this now. So that would be the next step. Like now I would sit and probably like bevel this edge here. We can do that now. I usually tend to bevel very late because I want to have the option to move back and not like in Blender we can bevel early because we have the modifiers, but Maya I usually tend to like stay away from beveling quite long. Can add more edge loops here. But, of course, clean this up, but I just want to show that if we update now, we can start kind of getting everything more detailed. So now this gets a bit more detail. Seems like the materials are not hooked up correctly, but now we get like a softer line there. And then I can show how that looks like off the next step. So if we jump to week 3 here, I think we have, I'm not going to save that. Yeah, I kind of like, let's see, we can select everything, I think, and take away. So what I'm showing here is basically texture density. So everything is equal in resolution, and this checker is a tool for that. But I can turn this off by resetting everything. Like that. And this would be kind of like just the textured version of what we are. I had like the texture room here, but here basically the next step would be just to texture everything, and then we get in kind of like everything detailed with normals and stuff like that. So here we have like everything hooked up to a trim sheet, and everything is just mapped that. So everything here is basically like this is just 2 textures basically, and all of them are sharing the same. So having kind of like each step like this makes it. I have a very busy brain also, so I like to have just these kind of structured time slots basically. But I have stories why I'm doing this also. Like my Harry Potter scene that I worked on, that was like so much work, and I know so much work that you barely see, but I know that I spend like a month on it. So if I talk like this door took me probably a month to build because I basically hand modeled every ornament, but I feel like it's not worth a month of work, but like you don't see that much. And that's kind of why I'm kind of like now really trying to plan basically, because I don't want to spend a month on a door. I mean, I learned a lot, but it was also very stressful. So I kind of try to take away the stress when it comes to production at home, like with portfolio work. Thank you very much, Anthony. Next question. No worries. Thank you for the kind words, Lucy. Like I said, I want to kind of like share this and more. So my plan is to try to do a blog with my current project where I kind of like the first post is going to be why I'm doing it. The second one is going to be my thought on reference and how I go about reference. So I'm going to kind of like do it very step by step, that blog. And I'm hopefully going to be able to go from start to finish with that blog, basically, is the idea. Any other questions before we wrap up for today? And I always say that if there is any questions that you feel uncomfortable, ask in a group. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer in a DM if you feel like you want to answer ask something that you're a bit unsure to ask in group. But yeah, it was very fun to sit down and setting up some cameras with you all. I'm gonna gather kind of like the links and stuff like that. I'm gonna try to get that early video and the script and maybe some comments in a document that's gonna go out with like the video recording tomorrow. of this video recording, and I think it's going to kind of go to all mails basically. I don't get the question. Substance Painter live linked. What do you mean with that question, Anthony? Yeah. So I would say I use Substance Painter for detailed props, but then you have I would say nowadays a very common way of using Substance Painter is using something called RGB masks. Because the problem with like doing everything through Painter is that it takes too much time doing high poly, low poly baking. And you also, it's very expensive because you're using kind of like one texture per object, or maybe you're binding some together. So I would say nowadays it's quite common to use RGB masks. Let's see if I can pull up a good example of that. So if we do Steel Hunter, shows it quite nicely, I think. Like the game Steel Hunters. I think if we open some of these props here. So we use this this technique is very common now in AAA. So like putting this in Substance Designer would be very like expensive to like make it sharp in detail because it's so large. So instead, you basically, the nice thing with Painter is like the tools of Painter is so powerful, like the procedural workflow of texturing, but also like you can paint out the detail. So what we do nowadays is we paint out these masks instead. And then these masks basically is like a red, blue, and a green. And then you assign each of them to a tileable texture. Like you say like where they go, like which type of texture it kind of. And the cool thing is you can switch them. Like if it's snow landscape, you can switch it to snow. If it's a mud landscape, you can switch it to mud. You get very flexible that way also. But the cool thing is that everything here is a tileable texture, so you can have that being much more high res. So when the player goes up close, you get much more detail, so it doesn't look unsharp basically. And I would say it's fairly common to kind of like do that on most assets nowadays, depending on the product. Like some studios work differently, of course. So it's a very like broad. Like I would say every studio has their workflow, but I would say RGB mask is starting to become quite common, I would say. I'm probably going to use it quite a lot for my current project. But then you have like classical like this also. But you can see how much they pack here. This is a beautiful UV map. I'm going to actually save this one because I think I have wireframe here. And that's my tip, is always like jumping into these ArtStation posts. Like there is always like hidden gems in these. I spend my morning sometimes just clicking through this and just checking what they show. Like we get so much information here from other games. Here you get like a honest answer of a wireframe of a game that came out this year, basically. And that's why I have all those collections. So gathering that information at different places. But yeah, seems like all the questions have been answered. I want to say thank you for everyone staying so long, listening in. Oh, one more. Yeah, so C4D I have never used. I know about it, but I'm more kind of like Maya and Blender and jumping between them. ZBrush, or do you sculpt? So like I love ZBrush and I use it like for personal projects and stuff like that. Like I do stylized stuff also. So I'm currently doing kind of like I'm very bad at like just doing one project, so I like to do several projects at the same time. I would not recommend doing that like while kind of building a portfolio, but when you are in the industry, it can be quite nice to be able to kind of like jump between projects to not get like I would say for me it's kind of nice to get like different influence. So I jump between like stylized and not stylized. I have this is a bit messy, but I have this project with like Vibara. So this is like very ZBrush. So I do like ZBrush when it's like this style, like more stylized, and I do quite a lot of ZBrushing. But when it's like this, like more realistic stuff, this is very like driven by textures and stuff like that. I might take this into ZBrush and stuff like that. So I would say sometimes maybe like I like using ZBrush, but nowadays you can do a lot through Designer. But if you want like a very certain style, I would say a very good example of that is God of War. I feel like that whole game is driven by ZBrush. So to get that style, I think you have to use ZBrush. And I'm probably going to use ZBrush quite a lot because I've not used it in a while. So I kind of want to do it again a little bit. I feel like these like this looks quite nice, but this can be like just tileable, but it could be driven by ZBrush. So I would say it depends on the visual style of the game usually. And then the next question. So like if I would kind of do a hyperlink, I remesh basically in ZBrush, I would say, like because the remesh is still powerful. I tried to kind of like do a whole scene with just Blender sculpting. Like that was kind of the idea of this project. So this is very sculpted project. But I like back then, like that was 3 years ago. Blender was not good enough for sculpting. But I think nowadays, like they updated Blender's kind of like render engine for higher polygon. So I think like nowadays we could probably do like almost like what you can do in ZBrush, you can do in Blender when it comes to sculpting. Like already then it was kind of working, but it was just when you get too high, it was very laggy. So I kind of gave up through half of this project and just switched to ZBrush basically to sculpt things. I'm quite bad at like showing breakdowns, and that's why I kind of want to do the blog because usually when I'm done with the project, I'm just so tired of kind of like showing the behind the scenes, and I kind of like feel like we should be better at that, sharing knowledge. So that's why I'm planning on doing the blog while working on the project, so I don't kind of sneak away from not showing stuff. But yeah, any other questions, or should we wrap up for the day? So I think we have a live stream in a month again. Trying to remember what the theme is then. I can maybe find that out and reveal it already. I check plan. It might not be set yet. I'm gonna see if I can find that in a chat. Because that could be interesting for people to know already. I'm gonna scroll a little bit in a chat here. So next topic is going to be foliage, actually. So we're going to talk about foliage creation, and I think it's going to cover like a little bit like the idea of kind of blocking it out early, but I'm going to probably also include a little bit like production, like from start to finish in that. So that's going to be the next subject next month. And after that, we have sculpting in ZBrush. So I don't know if that's going to be December or if it's going to be January. So we're going to actually have a ZBrush focused stream in the future. But yeah, thank you for everyone that showed up and listened in. It was very fun to sit and talk with you guys, and always great to get all these questions. I think that's the main reason why I like doing this, because I remember myself wondering a lot of these things, and then getting the possibility to hear one voice on it. It's good, I think. But there is always different view sets on everything. So my view set might be one, but then I think it's always good to listen to other ones, and that's why I'm going to include a couple of videos and stuff like that on other people talking about the subjects we talked about today. But yeah, I wish everyone a super nice weekend, and I see you all maybe next time. So that's going to be probably in a month. So have a great November, and I see you all. Bye bye.